ready? All right, let me get this mouthful right now. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting workshop on Wednesday, January 28th, 2026 here at 10:45 p.m. It's probably about 10:48 p.m. or a.m. rather, right now. And so we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. We've got a lot to do. We probably officially won't start with our Zoom until about 11. But at this time, we definitely want to give people who are here for public comment the opportunity to do so. Let me get my little sheet to read. Do we have anyone who? Not at this point. Okay. I should probably read this anyway. Where did they go? Sorry. Somebody. I promise I had it. We don't need to read it. Okay. Well, no, I had. Oh, I wonder if I'll put it in the front. I was trying to make room. No, there it is. So now is the time for public comment. At this special meeting, anyone may address the board on posted agenda items only. If you wish to address the board, please fill out a comment card and a request card and hand it to him. At this time, remarks are limited to 3 minutes. Groups of more than 5 referencing the same topic may be asked to appoint one person. Because of open meetings law, the board may not discuss any topic not on the agenda, and therefore will not respond to any remarks related to non-agenda items. The board may, but is not required to respond to these items. If your comment addresses a concern or complaint about a specific college employee or student, such complaints must be timely filed through the formal grievance processes under college policy. If you've not attempted to solve the matter through the grievance process, you will be directed to the appropriate policy to seek resolution. Do we have any comments at this time? Anyone seeking public comment? All right. As a quorum is now present. Thank you, Michelle. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Dr. Woodward, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Awesome.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you.
Awesome. They won't be on until 11.
Correct.
So at this time, as we've called the meeting to order, I want to give some comments here myself, and I want to recognize one of our board members today, and he would not want to be recognized. I'm looking right at him, and just want to recognize Dr. David Woodburn. He's a longtime Amarillo dentist whose decades of volunteer service have delivered millions, as much as $3.8 million in free dental care to underserved patients. And he's been named the 2025 Amarillo Globe News headliner. Further, he will be honored at a ceremony tomorrow. We have a table for Amarillo College there. He will not be there because I understand Dr. Woodburn is off on another mission, and so his family will be there to receive this great recognition. Woodburn is widely recognized for his leadership in bringing the Texas Mission of Mercy dental clinics to Amarillo, large-scale 2-day events that provide free dental care to people who otherwise lack access. Since 2011, 5 TMOM events in Amarillo have served more than 3,800 patients and provided more than $3.5 million in dental services, according to several community organizations and healthcare leaders. Dr. Woodburn, we just want to recognize you today for your service, and you have been a value to this community, and I'm so glad that you get this well-deserved recognition. Congratulations.
I assure you it wasn't all done by myself.
I know. You were at the forefront of it, though, so we appreciate you. We know what you do. And
Appreciate being right.
yes, absolutely.
I think he's being recognized because he had a birthday.
Oh, no. Is it today?
Yesterday.
Oh, yesterday.
Yesterday.
Happy birthday then yesterday. I missed that.
And Regent Carlisle recently had a birthday.
Yes, she did.
We're glad to have birthdays.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. But so at this time, we're going to go ahead and eat. We have some food over here. We will begin a Zoom at 11. And it's my understanding at 11, the colleges that are on there will be given 5 minutes for public comment. So we really officially won't begin this section of the meeting where we get into the training. until 11:05. So we will take a pause and be back at 11:05. All right.
cold here in Washington, D.C. But hopefully it'll in a couple of weeks, so it'll makes it hard to drive.
That's
Let alone walk. Well, good to see everybody. Thank you so much for joining the second convening of the Texas Collaborative. We are very pragmatic. I want to know what practices and leadership lead to better student outcomes in colleges and universities across the country. About 2/3 of our work to 3/4 of our work is with community colleges. We also run a 4-year cert. I mean, we do all of our work is we try to identify colleges achieving the best results. It starts with the facts. Who's doing best? And then back into how did they get there? What practices were engaged in? What leadership practices were necessary to achieve those results? And then put information up to the field, tools, assessment tools, do all of those assessment tools and use them, as well as curriculum and engagement with college leaders, life, self, and teams. And this is part of the work that we do. A nonprofit organization. Primarily, we do them with funding that originated through a request by us to others, not others in us and say we want to do X, Y, and Z. So we're doing based on the seen in the field the work that we're doing. This collaborative, just as a reminder for those who've been thus far, what happened in the December meeting that we did in person, Then we'll talk about aligning policies and budgets to advance student outcome, and then we'll go into breakout rooms from 12:10 to 12:55. There will be a break then after the breakout rooms, and there's a second breakout room conversation. So some of you will be at track A. Track A breakout room will be about refining your meeting agendas, aligned to what matters most. You'll be thinking about how in your time as a board, what does the agenda look like, and what change do you want to make there? And track B colleges will be thinking about what policy and budget do you want to. We have a terrific group of facilitators here. Other than me, every one of these individuals has led a college. I happen to have had the privilege of working with lots of colleges and lots of college leaders. But these are the track A colleges. So please mark down whether you're a track A college or a track B college, because that will tell you what you'll be doing at different times. And so with that, I'd like to actually invite the facilitators to introduce themselves so that you're all aware of the terrific people that we have here. We'll start, why don't we go left to right, top row and then bottom row, starting with Pascal.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pascal Charlot. I'm the Managing Director of the College Excellence Program. I'm coming to you from Miami, where I was a campus president at Miami-Dade College. I'll turn it over to Brenda Case.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brenda Case. I have worked for over 40 years as a community college educator, the last 15 years serving as college president. I'll be retiring from Kilgore College in East Texas at the end of February, and I'm looking forward to serving the broader student success reform agenda. And I'll turn it to Maria.
Hello, everyone. Maria Harper-Marinick. I am a senior fellow with the Aspen Institute, and before that, I had a long career with the Maricopa Community Colleges in Arizona in a variety of roles, including chancellor for the system until my retirement in 2020. I'm glad to be here and work with all of you. And then Hope.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Hope Rivers, and I serve as the president of Piedmont Technical College. In South Carolina, technical colleges are like community colleges. So president of Piedmont, I've been here for 5 years. Prior to me coming to Piedmont Tech as the president, I served as the executive vice president for the South Carolina Technical College system, where I oversaw all of the boards that we have for the technical college system. And I did that for nearly 20 to 22 years. So I have about 30 plus years in education.
Thanks, Hope. We'll go to Mary next.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and Happy New Year to you all. I am Mary Ritling, and I'm a senior fellow for the Aspen Institute College of Excellence program. In my previous life, I was a college president at Davidson Davie Community College in North Carolina for 16 years, and then also served in other systems such as the West Virginia University system and also the SUNY system. Pleasure to be with you all.
Great. And I don't think I introduced myself, Josh Weiner. I'm the executive director of the College Excellence Program at Aspen, where for 15 years I've been doing research on excellent colleges and doing some work with boards and presidents along the way. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it now for a few technical notes as well as the notice of public meeting to my colleague, Leanne. Leanne, over to you.
Thanks, Josh. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see so many of you again. I was with many of you in December, and I'm just delighted that we're back together. Today, if you encounter any technical snags, please text the number that is both on your screen, and I've dropped it in the chat for your reference. Josh, if you'll bump to the next slide really quickly, the other thing we are going to ask you to do today is to rename yourself with your first and last name and the college that you are affiliated with. You can do this by hovering over the bar at the bottom of your screen and click participants. You'll see 3 little dots, and you'll be able to use these dots to click rename and change your name. If you're struggling with renaming yourself, don't worry. We can repeat these directions into the chat for you, and we can also provide assistance with that. The final thing I want to do before I let Josh get us into content is honor the fact that some of you are in quorum, and we have had a request to make sure that we publicly open the meeting to any comments from members of the public that might be on the call. So I'm going to do my due diligence and read a very short public comment script so that we can tick that box, and we have in fact invited members of the public who may be on the call to comment. So we are now open for public comment. Members of the public are invited to comment on items that will be discussed today. You have 3 minutes. We ask that you raise a hand using the chat feature. We will then call you and unmute you. So, are there any requests for public comment? I will pause for 10 seconds to allow for a response. Since I do not see any raised hands and there are no comments in the chat, this concludes the public comment period, and we will move on with our session. Back over to you, Josh.
Thanks so much, Leanne. So we wanted to start by just grounding us. I remember when I served on the board of our university and the community college here in Washington, I often got to meetings and had to reorient myself, right? Each of you has, some of you are working, others may be retired, all of you have busy lives regardless. And so just want to come back to where we were in December and reground you in the broader goals of the collaborative work. So again, here, our hope for you is that you identify new and revised ways of collaborating and aligning your work to student success reforms and improvement in student outcomes. Second, that your board meetings will be more focused as a result of this engagement on the things that matter to you, including student success reforms. And again, as I mentioned earlier, that the CEO-trustee relationship will be strengthened by increasing a shared understanding of where it is you're trying to go and why it is that you're making the changes that you are. All of this is grounded in the idea that colleges that achieve great results for students focus on 3 different things. One is they make sure that students, after they graduate, have good lives. For community college students, that means either a bachelor's degree, which can lead to a good job, or going directly into the workforce through your workforce CTE programs. And that one thing that excellent colleges do is ground their thinking and reforms in the ultimate success that matters for students and society, which is getting that bachelor's degree, getting a good job. It's also important then to make sure that students complete programs. We know that completing a program of value is much more likely to lead to those post-graduation outcomes than not doing so, and that students have access to college, that you're keeping your doors open through dual enrollment, through adult learner recruitment, through all of the work needed to make sure that access is maintained. And we call this Community College 3.0. And I mention that because that's a grounding for a lot of the work that we do, is to help colleges think about how to ensure all 3 of those important goals: access, completion, and post-completion success. What we know from Aspen's work is that scaled and sustainable, what we would call 3.0 reforms, are rooted in models of excellence. This has been done by great colleges around the country. That's what's across the bottom. That's why we do the Aspen Prize work, is we're trying to learn which colleges achieve the best results and how they got there. And understanding that, making sure that we all keep asking the question, who's doing the best work in this space? What can we learn from them? How can we benchmark ourselves to them? And how can we advance is important. And fundamentally, this 3.0 work is about strengthening the program portfolio, making sure what the college offers leads to bachelor's degrees and leads to good jobs. That's the programs. Making sure that onboarding and advising is aligned. You've all done a lot of work on that front. And then excellence in teaching and learning. So that what happens in courses in the classroom leads to the kind of learning that in turn leads to the kind of program completion that will in turn lead to better results. So the question that we asked in our research is, what do boards do to contribute to that, right? Obviously, boards aren't deciding what the curriculum for different programs are. We know that you may be reviewing those, and that may have changed some under recent laws, but fundamentally, that's the college's job. The college is devising the advising system to make sure that students can make their way into and through programs of value. And certainly, the board is not teaching classes. So the question then becomes, what's the board's responsibility? And I think the first thing is, it's to work with the president to make sure that you're aligned on the why and what of reform. The most important part of this is that the highly effective boards understand what you're trying to change. What metrics do you want to change? You're trying to improve graduation rates? Are you trying to get more people out into manufacturing and nursing? Are you trying to get more students to transfer and get bachelor's degrees? What are you trying to move? Why does that matter? And then what are the main reforms for getting there? We talked about that. But the more you as a board share an understanding with the president about the priority reforms and the reasons for them, the more all of this other work will flow and be effective. The second part of the agenda that we talked about the last time is, so if you know where you're going and what the reforms are, to choose a limited set of leading and lagging indicators you'll be monitoring regularly, right? That you have a set of things you're looking at all the time. Many of you I know look at math and English in the first year. Many of you look at the number of students who transfer to four-year schools, how many graduate. There are a lot of things that you're looking at, but try to pick a limited number of those so that you see a through line as a board, so you can both support the college in doing the work and hold the college accountable. You're working with the president to hold the college accountable for meeting these, for advancing the metrics that matter most. So we talked a little bit about that. And just before we get to now number 3, which is what we're going to talk about today, just as a reminder, these are the things that you talked about before. You discussed the why and what of reform. You talked about strengthening the alignment to leading and lagging indicators. And you talked a little bit, and you're going to do a little more today, about the board meetings and structures and how they can be aligned. These are some of the things that you thought about. These were the questions that you considered in our last session. What limited set of metrics do you want to monitor? How can you make your agenda consistent and aligned to reform? And how can you make sure that the board meetings are focused on what matters most? And the other side of that coin is reducing time on things that are misaligned with your reform agenda. How can you cut back on the time where you're sitting there as a board member thinking, this is pro forma, why are we going through this? Is this really adding to our conversation? Is it interesting and important to the college? Or is it something that we do because we've always done it this way? And so we'd love to open it up to you for any thoughts about, since the last time we were together, how is your college working towards 3.0 outcomes, priority metrics at board monitoring, and any reflections or action taken from the December meeting, just as a transition to sort of enable all of you to get your thinking aligned with where you were, so that we can then move into the policy and board conversation. So I will rely on Leanne to let people off mute or call on people. And you can either just come off mute or raise your hand, or put something in the chat, however you'd like.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I'm in an important Zoom meeting. Tell me what I need to know.
Hi, Jeanette. Jeanette, I think you're off mute. Thank you.
It's me who's trying to come in virtually,
Mhm.
and that's what they're asking. Numerous.
That's true.
How do you answer it?
That's fine.
Any reflections from our prior?
This is Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret.
College, yes, thank you so much. This is really very helpful. We learned a lot at the meeting in December. It was very well worthwhile. The presentations were excellent, and it was great that we had opportunity to have breakout sessions with each of the colleges and members of the board, of course, of the Houston City College. One of the areas that we thought was particularly helpful, and there were many, but I'm going to mention two. One is the why and the what of reform. And we thought that in using the logic model, that was a good model to use with the playbook. I mean, it was really excellent. But as we looked at the why and the what of reform, there was also a focus on the institutional opportunities, the challenges, the strategies, as well as the action that can be taken. And so our board members thought that with the great data that you shared, that it was really very helpful as we looked at the earning potential of the students who enroll in various programs, that it would be very helpful if we look at the programs that we offer that move students beyond the standard wage rate to being at or above the poverty level that was mentioned. So we're looking at that yield of students from $48,000 a year to $65,000 a year, as it were. And so as a result of that conversation at our last board meeting, we were able to begin the presentations to the board on what that looks like and what that means in terms of how we program, what that means in terms of our strategic plan. So that was very helpful. In addition to that, one of the things that we thought was that as we looked at what we continue doing, what we stop doing, and what we start doing, that was very helpful in our breakout sessions as well. And I know that will be coming a little bit later. So we created a matrix for all of those and distributed that matrix to the members of our board who were present in December for feedback. And so we'll be discussing that today as well. But I think Trustee Cheevan was the one who asked specifically for the information on the poverty level and the programs. And so perhaps Trustee Cheevan would like to respond to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we began that conversation in our last board meeting. So just building broader fluency across the full board about the call to action and the opportunity that we have here at Houston City College. And I know that we're going to have a continuing set of discussions on that with the board, which I'm very excited about. I would say also we've been proactive, knowing that we will have a lot to talk about in the space and we don't want our meetings to go into the wee hours of the night. We've begun proactively kind of trimming down some of the pomp and circumstance that goes into our meetings so that we're bending our attention curve, to steal a phrase from about 15 years ago, towards student outcomes and student achievement versus some of the stuff we have been focused on. So I think that's starting to show dividends. In some cases, we went a little bit too far, so we're finding the sweet spot, but just trying to be more intentional with how we're spending on our time so that we can put as much of our attention on student outcomes and student achievement as we can.
Thank you for sharing that. I think there are two reflections that are clear in your experience, which is that doing this work is not about a static set of measures. You're going to discover things. Frankly, state law has been changed. House Bill 8 changed the dynamic in terms of how the college is funding and forced a different kind of focus on post-graduation success. It's now being changed again in terms of the money that comes alongside achievement of certain milestones and certain outcomes. And so it's only natural that the board will be shifting its focus with the president to think about these new outcomes. And so I really appreciate that you're taking a look at program value, which programs are leading to good wages and which may not be. One caution is that as you add things like that, you also have to ask the question, what might you subtract? That if you just keep adding new measures to old measures, that it will become harder and harder for the board to remain focused on the things that matter and to align conversations to the things that matter. And so really appreciate that this is an iterative process. What you decide in this collaborative a year from now may very well change based on your understanding of the outcomes for the college and your perspective, as well as state policy. The second is this idea of aligning the work that you have is also a way of being, not a momentary action. Our hope is that the exercises you go through here become at least annual processes you engage in, so that each year you can sit down and say, okay, last year we aligned what we were doing to what matters most. But just as the trustee who just spoke mentioned, you may find that you overdial in one direction or another. You also may find that there are new board members that come in, and you've got to take a step back and add certain foundational things. That also may change. And so trying to find an annual way of asking these questions so that it becomes a way of doing the work in addition to the opportunities you have here. And again, all of the tools that are available through this collaborative, Tim Lowry, we're making available to her, and she can continue to use those indefinitely. Our hope is that this kind of work will continue in support of your work. And all of the Aspen tools that have been developed, and we've had great input from the Texas Community College Association and the Student Success Center, that you will continue to use those in the future. As long as this work continues, we are making this available to Texas with no charge, and we don't have to raise grant money around it. We aim for that to continue to be used. So thank you for that. Mike, over to you.
Oh yeah, thanks, Josh. I think, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay,
fine. Thank
perfect.
You.
I just wanted to continue that through line that you mentioned and that Margaret and her trustees had emphasized, right, which is really creating that cadence for student success, in particular focused on post-completion outcomes. So I was fortunate in Dallas to have both our chair, Dr. Kingsbury, who typed in some comments about what he has asked and charged myself and the leadership team from Alamo to come up with, really is creating that cadence focused on post-completion outcomes, and to be able to create the space either for the trustees through a policymaking framework, through board policy, and then also for us to look at program level data and ensuring that we are completing students in workforce programs, right, into a family sustaining wage category or band, and then also preparing students for transfer, for those students that select transfer as an option, but embedding either micro-credentials or certifications in that process to ensure that whatever their degree is, that credential, that they are also at or above a family sustaining wage. So the team has been very focused on that work. We see a nice juxtaposition and through line from initially San Antonio College's involvement in unlocking opportunity, and now the 4 additional colleges. So all 5 of our Alamo colleges are working on unlocking opportunity. And so this ties in nicely with actually our board chair, Dr. Kingsbury, and the trustees wanting to ensure we move in tandem to either from the policymaking framework, right, effectuating that through budget development and resourcing, but really creating the space for us to make some difficult decisions, right? These are difficult decisions to look at perhaps a program that may be graduating a student and they're going to earn $28,000 versus a high school graduate earning $25,000 and the family sustaining wage being $43,000. So I think that that's an important piece for us to consider as part of this work. So I just want to thank you all and thank our board chair and our trustees for giving us a space for us to work in tandem.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. And thank you, Clint, for your comments in the chat, as well as Bob Exley. Really appreciate the comments that you made in the chat as well. For those of you who are not familiar with Unlocking Opportunity, there are 2 foundational documents. That one is a classification tool, and a second is the 8 strategies in unlocking, which we'll post in the chat. If anybody's interested in those and wants to talk further about those, of course, we would be happy to share more about the unlocking work for those that are not as familiar with it as Mike and Clint and the Alamo colleges and several others of you who are engaged might be. Paul, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you very much. Dr. Allen could speak to this more thoroughly than me, but as we're talking about boards, I'll speak as the board chair at WCJC, and a number of things that we've done have already been mentioned, so I won't belabor them, but a couple of things I will mention. So even when we were sort of thinking in the 2.0 level, Dr. Allen was rebuilding her team around these outcomes, and so we now have a vice president that's actually focusing on these outcomes and kind of unifying that across the college. So that's a really critical thing that she's doing that we're understanding better. And that the understanding part is a point I wanted to kind of foot soften. The reason I particularly raised my hand is that those of us that came to this session, there were 3 board members from our college that came to the session at DFW. I felt strongly, and the holiday sort of affected this somewhat, that we not skip the socializing phase where we told everybody else about 3.0, because we had a lot of other board members that weren't there, and none of the public was there, and none of the faculty and staff was there. So we have been trying to be intentional about sharing what 3.0 is. We had a workshop for the board last week to really talk about it, the understanding of it. I think most people embraced it. I think the board embraced it, but there was still an uneven understanding where, we were going back to, head count being the number one, metric for some people and having to kind of re-explain. So it sort of validated that we need to not just communicate about this once, but to message this. If this is our goal, we need to be saying this to all of our audiences and stakeholders, et cetera. The other thing that I think, 2 other things that I've just mentioned quickly are a little bit random, or not random, but not necessarily in order. And that is that as we make these hard decisions of what success we're going to reinforce, what new programs we're going to go after, what programs we're going to close down, we're finding that we need metrics and analysis, financial analysis and things like that we're not really set up to get. So we're working with our finance people to help us have better cost models for the board to make decisions about what the payoff will be for certain moves. We even had it was kind of cool. Some of the people that weren't there at DFW came up with some pretty radical metrics. Like one of them was, if you were going to, let's say you were going to do a program that's going to cause you to graduate 20 more students a year whose starting salary is 80K. How do you compare that to, if a program that's going to have 100 new students a year, but it's going to be right at the poverty level, so I really like that conversation because it told me they got what we were talking about, whether we actually use that metric or not. And then the other thing that you mentioned in a subsequent slide that I've peeked ahead that I really want to emphasize is that I was trying to talk to the board, and I think some of them are getting it, but I really want to keep emphasizing this is it's not just about the cost side, it's also about the revenue side. And we need to be really analyzing that side to see what adjustments we need to make and what opportunities are out there. If you do something new, are there grants, et cetera, very aggressively looking at our revenue side as we go through this. Those are just some thoughts I had.
Thank you. Really thoughtful reflections, and I'm delighted with the conversation you're having. And you're really talking about mission versus business interests of the college, and making sure that you're helping as many students be successful after they graduate as possible within the realm of what the college can afford, and making sure that you understand the financial implications. We'll talk a little bit more about the budgeting and how short-term versus longer-term thinking may have an impact on that. Like if you really think about delivering value over the long term, Paul, I think what you end up getting is long-term value understood in the community, and that will capture future enrollments that will be strong over the long run, even if the short-term costs may be greater in delivering value. The long-term benefits in gaining enrollments, future enrollments, and investments from employers may be greater. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Thank you so much. Manita, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Josh. And so we've already started working on some of the ideas we had during the meeting in December. And part of our transformational advising center versus transactional advising center, we believe is going to lead us to a stronger path. Our numbers are not bad. I think our numbers are really good. Our retention numbers are still not where we'd like them to be. And therefore, we believe that through the revisions of how we do advising, will long-term give our students that ability to have sustainable employment or a successful transfer once they finish the program. We still have a large number of students who are part-time students because they're working full-time. And while a lot of the initiatives we've implemented have really changed outcomes, going to 8 weeks, going to the 4-week programming for our workforce programs, the OERs, the free meal plans, all of those things made a huge impact, which we did last year when I was doing the President's Aspen. But now we're getting to the nitty-gritty and actually workflowing what our advisors do and how they're doing it. And we're looking at it budgetarily and through policy, saying the possibility of the new budget cycle holding, adding additional advisors, and requiring that each student be assigned an advisor until they graduate. And so we believe that building those relationships with students who are already struggling or are first generation or really don't understand the process, having that one individual to go to will make a difference in long-term retention, graduation, and either job placement or transferability. And so that's this board's goal. Yes, the metrics have to go up in retention, but more importantly, our metrics have to continue to go up in graduation and long-term sustainability financially.
Thank you so much. And that's a great segue to the conversation we want to have today about policies and budgets. That kind of clarity about what your reform agenda is that both Paul and Manita and prior speakers reflected. I think the idea for our session today is, how are you going to do budget and policy work that's aligned to that? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the policy side of what we've learned. Much of this comes, actually, some of it comes from your colleges in Texas, but from around the country. We've learned this from you. And then I'm going to hand it to my colleague Pascal, who's going to talk a little bit on the budgetary side. So let's talk a little bit about what the big ideas are here. So the question is, how can you use budget and policy? And we'll talk a little bit about how policies can include resolutions. They don't have to be necessarily policies that are written in stone. They may be messages, they may be policies to contribute to student success reforms. And how can the budget be presented in a way so that the kinds of reforms that require investment, like those that President Ramirez just cited, increased numbers of advisors, can be foregrounded in the budget consideration? How do you start to foreground purpose in the budget conversation so that the board understands that it's not approving line items of personnel and facilities, et cetera, but is understanding what's changing to advance student success reforms? So let's start with the policy conversation. Here are the key ideas. It is that the CEO is really thinking about, so what are the big policy changes we need to make, both in resolutions and in actual policy changes that will lead to better results for students, that will contribute to the reform agenda. Some of it is about the public commitment. I know that at the Alamo colleges in the prior administration, we saw this where There was a lot of work on guided pathways that required that all of the 5 colleges across the system do the same things, adopt similar advising structures, have the same clusters of programs. And there was frankly resistance to that. And the board issuing a resolution that said, this is how we do business, issuing a policy saying it was as much, it mattered because people were resisting. There was even a vote of no confidence for the chancellor. But because the chancellor had shared with the board, this is why we're doing this. We are creating guided pathways to create clarity for students. We're creating mandatory advising touch points so that every student will get on a track and stay on the track, right? There was just clarity around that so that when people got upset, it wasn't a question of, well, the board's now going to back off of this. No, it's set in policy. It's making statements. It is shifting the budget from faculty advisement to professional advisement. That line item shifted over. That became the budget consideration for the college. And because the board fully understood why the changes were being made and what the changes were, that when people got upset about it, they were able to reflect back. I understand that change is hard, but we're supporting the chancellor and we're supporting leadership to do this work because we understand it. Not just a matter of whether people are upset or not upset. It was a matter of making sure that the reforms could take hold. And indeed, if you look at the Alamo colleges and the improvement in student success that resulted, a lot of it was enabled by that. Had the reforms, after a couple of years, the guided pathways reforms gone south, had they been stopped, we would not see a near tripling of graduation rates at many of the colleges in the Alamo system. So adopt policies to support that reform agenda is the basic idea. Here's another example, Mohawk Valley in New York State. They were doing student success work, but modeled after the Alamo policy that was adopted, they made it their own. And really, these were different metrics than Alamo used, but they said, you know what? If the board says that the college will consistently focus on student success, on providing opportunities for students, and on enhancing the local workforce, that statement alone suggested what mattered most. That became the guiding principle for the work. Then they talked about the reform priority being guided pathways. And then it literally names the priority metrics that the college will use, including completion metrics, course completion, momentum data, retention, and transfer, but also employment, graduation, and success. So this is in the policies established by the board. And so anybody at the college who had doubts that when the president, Randy von Wagner, decided to retire, that this would end, that they could just wait him out, I think got a different message here, right? This is the policy of Mohawk Valley Community College. It wasn't controversial, but it wasn't stated. And they saw this as an opportunity to make a statement. So what does it look like to go from the traditional way that boards adopt policies to what we would call a transformational process for doing that? So one is, there are policies that just come before you. And I remember when I was on a board, I would read them and maybe I had some questions, but the president wanted them. We always voted yes. That was fine. And there was no reason to second guess the president. Occasionally somebody would have questions about a financial aid policy or something, but by and large, we just approved them and we were pretty passive. I think the flip here is that the board, that the president of the college, the CEO of the college, is coming to the board and saying, look, here's what matters. Remember, here's what we're trying to do. Here's the why and what of reform. Here are the metrics we're trying to move. And here are 3 policies that will advance that, right? We've seen colleges ending late registration. We've seen colleges requiring that every student finish a student success course in the first year that was aligned to finishing a program plan. Again, I'm not suggesting what your policy should be, but the president's coming and saying, look, this is what we want to get done. And frankly, with this board policy being adopted, I can move faster. The message to the college then is this is not optional. We are setting goals. Sometimes they include timelines to those goals, but that should be the president should be providing those. But the idea is it is our policy that this is what will happen. And it gets to scale. If it's policy, it has to affect every student. And often reforms stop with some 20% or 30% of students. I think the board and CEO assume that existing policies are adequate. I think the expectation that's set in this context is that the CEO is periodically bringing things to the board to change. It's not that the board decides. It's that the CEO, that the board says, hey, we haven't heard about policy in a year. Is everything working well? What are the things that are going to improve student success? And that leads to this last part, which is there are lots of contexts where board members are going to propose policies. Here's a policy. Why don't we say we will offer no program that doesn't offer at least $70,000 a year wages, raises that at a board meeting. Well, that is not a great way to proceed. Let me be clear. I think conversations with the CEO of, hey, what wage standard do we want to set? What would the implications of different wage standards be? To Paul, to your point, what would the different implications for both the mission and the business side? Let's, if you want to raise those kinds of issues, raise them in private meetings and have the president prepare a policy idea in consultation, perhaps behind the scenes with the board chair or others, but they're coming out in a unified way. Let me just say policy considerations or budget considerations that happen on the fly in board meetings can be very disruptive. It's not that the board shouldn't have questions. You should absolutely have questions to raise. Your obligation to ask questions if you have them. But the idea that the board is setting the budget during board meetings can be quite disruptive. So what are transformational student success policies? They're public-facing policies or resolutions that state the priority reform agenda and allow for and require that procedures support the implementation of reform. They're designed to make changes reach greater scale and last longer, right? More students affected, longer lasting changes. And they're simple, clear ideas that everybody can keep referring back to direct the conversation in the right way. What are they not? They tend not to be rigid metrics upon which the board and CEO are evaluated. So just note that back in this, I'll go back to the Mohawk example. They named the priority metrics, but they didn't say it is the policy of this board that we will have a 62% graduation rate. That's not policy. That's a moving number. They're not compliance statements, right? We will do what the state told us to do. You may need to do that, adopt those and forget about that. They're really aspirational. So this is what we want you to focus on as you're thinking about the opportunity to work on policy. So now I'll open it up again before we move to the budget side. To any thoughts that you have, questions that you have, and including the facilitators, because our facilitators have worked with other colleges as well. Any other examples that might be helpful for the participants in today's session? And thank you, President Exley, for noting your participation in Unlocking Opportunity. We're delighted to have several Texas colleges engaged. Yes, did somebody come off mute? Questions? And we can certainly reserve the conversation for the breakout rooms for you to think about these things together, and then maybe we can come back afterwards. You may have more ideas later on. But let me just keep the airways open here for just another.
Just very quick reflection. Sean Cheban from Houston City.
Thank you, Sean.
Use of resolutions really resonated with me. I think we try to have our chancellors back as she's pursuing the reform agenda, but that is such a great public way to, in writing with votes, do that and really show that we're a team of 10, laser focus on student achievement. So I think that's something I'm going to noodle on, of how we can incorporate that into our toolkit and be more visibly public about having the chancellors back and acting as that team of 10 around some of these items.
Yeah, let me just mention one other advantage of doing that is that when a new board member comes on, you share with them what the key policies are. And it makes clear to them that this isn't one board member's opinion. This is the policy of the institution. So it's just a way of clarifying, and that there's just when you have to write something down, you get more precise about it and you're clearer about it, and that's easier to convey to others. So thank you for sharing that. It's important both for the current board and future iterations of the board. Any other reflections on this? And again, you're going to have an opportunity to really be thinking about this in your groups. All right. Well, let me then, if I can, hand this over to Pascal, who's going to talk about the budget side of the work. And Pascal, I'll advance slides for you, so just let me know when you'd like me to move to the next slide.
Thanks, Josh, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to pick up on Sean's comment about having the back of the CEO, because in many ways, what Josh is describing is how the nature of your partnership as a president and board evolves within the context of committing to a reform agenda. Because in effect, you're going to be moving people's cheese and they're not going to be happy about it. And to the extent that you are very clear about the why and the what, and you develop the policies that support it, it will then lead you to really face the hard questions about where to find the resources, which has often gotten in the way of pursuing these reforms in the first place. And so unless you're clear about the why and the what, and you start thinking about those policies, you're not going to be able to have a different kind of conversation when it comes to the budget allocation and thinking about the impact of your strategic finances. And that's really this aspect of the conversation, which is an expression of your commitment to advance student reforms. So when we're thinking about budget allocation within this context, it requires understanding what are the finances and the different ways you're going to need to think about substantial resources so that you can invest in those reforms. And it's based on your partnership, how you move forward with this decision, right? The CEO will do the preliminary work of doing an analysis of the resources, an assessment of the institution, recognizing what the needs will be, and they will come to you with recommendations. Your job as a board is to understand the reforms well enough to engage in the right kind of conversation with a degree of discipline so that you can leverage your professional experiences to ask the right questions to ensure that the resources are not only available and aligned, but also that your support for that resource allocation is not only clear to the CEO, but also to the rest of the institution. And so what we're going to talk about in this part of the conversation is what does it look like when you commit to a student success reform agenda, which in Josh's words is playing the long game, right? So we're no longer looking at annual decisions, incremental decisions, but really thinking about smart investments that will yield long-term results. And how does that change the conversation when we think about strategic resource allocation? Next slide. So what does that look like? Currently, and in most instances, boards look at the budget in an annual way and often thinking about it through the lens of incremental changes, right? Which lends itself to an annual review that's not necessarily aligned to a multi-year agenda, to an agenda that's looking at systemic change and could be upending previous practices, right? So the idea of this reform really should be changing how you think about the work of the budget, and it should prompt you to not only think about the immediate future, but really looking at the long-term gains and what are the implications of those investments. And so when you're looking at the budget, how are you connecting the line items in the budget to the resources you will need to advance the student success reform? And to the extent you understand the reforms, you'll also have a sense of the sequencing and the prioritization and what's coming next. But you start thinking about those funds in a very different kind of way because you'll recognize that the annual lens, it's just too limited for you to play the long game that we're describing. And secondly, you want to ensure that you've empowered your CEO to provide the information that you need to make those smart decisions. But if you're entering these conversations without an understanding of the reform agenda and also with the kinds of questions relevant to that reform, your budget conversations are likely to not become more substantive in ways that are relevant. And also for you to not continue to evolve your understanding of the reforms as you make these decisions. Because here's the deal. These decisions are not one and done. As the college continues to discover different aspects of the reform through the different kinds of innovations and continuous improvement processes, it's quite possible they will be coming to you for more resources. So to the extent you're not thinking about the budget in a parallel track with the reform agenda, your ability to add value to those conversations will diminish over time. So we're encouraging you, as you embrace this long game perspective, to think about how you approach your budget review process and to continue shifting your perspective to the extent it is limited to an annual view, to thinking more long term with an understanding of the alignment with the resources, the reforms that you're trying to advance. Next slide. The second element is, I'm sorry?
Jump in with a question on that, and I apologize for interrupting your chain of thought. Is there a particular institution that's really good at that? It's a really intriguing idea, and I want to dig into it more, but there's nothing like seeing somebody who's really pulled that off successfully versus us trying to invent something out of whole cloth.
You know, the institution that comes to mind is when we think about the work of the advanced program that George Mason is doing in partnership with NOVA. This is a transformational transfer partnership, which is looking at, which has improved the completion rate and bachelor's attainment rate of students of both institutions. And what they've done is they've looked at not only their institutional resources, but how could they leverage resources as a partnership. They've pursued funding together. They haven't limited the scope of their budget to the immediate needs, but they've thought about where they'd like the program to grow and how to invest in the backbone structure of the institutions that is needed for the work. And so really, and I didn't quite see who was asking that question. I'm sorry, I couldn't see on the screen. But the idea here is that you want to think about the conversation related to scale. If your scope is too limited and you're not thinking systemically, you also don't have the right prompts to consider the scale and scope of the resources that you're aiming for. So when we think about this advanced model, there's a recognition that they were aiming for a large scale reform and they recognized their individual resources, but they also thought about what resources together they could pursue outside of the institution in order to invest in their idea. I'm going to ask Josh to also jump in if you can think of another example.
Yeah, it's a great example, Pascal, and I don't know the extent to which the board budget considerations were reflective of the strategy, but I think it's a terrific example because the clarity around what they were trying to accomplish in terms of bachelor's attainment for Northern Virginia Community College students drove a lot of the investments in advising. The one example I would use is that for many years, Valencia College did a terrific job of, on top of the budget presentation to the board, having slides about what the major changes were. But you may have to present your board budget in the same way it's always been done. The question is what sits on top of that? And they would talk about the major changes that they were making. So they also invested in a significant transfer project. They beefed up their short-term credentials from about 100 to 1,000 very quickly over this course of a number of years, and they had to make a very specific investment in non-credit, in the non-credit infrastructure to do that work. And so what sat on top of the budget was these big priorities. What are your big reform priorities? And underneath that is an example of the budget implications. So if your goal is, as Manita was suggesting, President Ramirez was suggesting earlier, if your goal is to make sure every student is on a plan in their first year, what you would show underneath that is that we're going to grow the number of advisors for case management advising from 10 to 30 and then from 30 to 50 over a 2-year period. Reminding people that the reason for that, right at that top of the budget document, the reason for that is so every student can get on a plan. So I think the idea here is, you know, we can certainly try to find some of the Valencia presentations, but the idea here is to organize your budget work at the top and then come behind that with what, organize your budget work around your reform agenda at the top. That's the category. Remember, what are the big reforms we're engaged in? And then here's what you're going to see in the budget in bullet points. that reflect that reform agenda. Here are the changes in the budget that reflect that. So it's just a different way than we tend to present budgets, which is not functional and reform-minded. We try to do everything, get everything done, and then we also put it in categories that, you know, we're increasing personnel by 12%. Well, why? What does that mean? What, you know, no, we've got to get the advisors from 10 to 30 to 50. Right? That's the point. So it's really aligning what you see in the budget to the function.
Thank you.
Great. Next slide. Another area where, oh, back one more, Josh, please. Trigger happy, I see you. But another area where you're thinking about the budget can also evolve within this context is how you think about grant applications, special programs, and other building budgets. Because very often those decisions are made independent of a larger and a more coherent strategy. Similar to the incremental decisions we just talked about in the previous slide, these decisions can be made in ways that are disconnected and in their own ways siloed. But the idea of thinking about, in particular, reform and systemic change and really pooling those resources, it invites you to think about where there are connections, where's there coherence, where's there's integration, and where's there alignment. And so as your conversations change, because of your commitment to this new North Star, you want to bring that perspective to even conversations about grant applications, special programs, and budgets, always asking the question, to what degree will these new investments support the strategies for reform? Because you'll be surprised to know how far you can stretch those dollars. And often those dollars can serve as seed money for integrating initiatives that become part of the systemic change. And so when we've seen institutions be smart about how to use those dollars, it has gone a long way to building the kind of systemic change that you're aiming for through reform. And so what you want to move towards is having the CEO begin to make the kind of connections that will allow you to understand the relevance of these particular programs or these particular grants or these particular resource allocations so that you can see the connection to the larger reforms and the kind of funding streams that will support improved outcomes. Next slide. Similar to the resource allocation is thinking differently about strategic finance more holistically. You know, we talked a bit about moving from an annual budget review to looking at a multi-year strategy, which includes not only thinking backwards, but the kind of projections. When you're thinking particularly about growth and student enrollment growth and the needs student success, what it will require is those multi-year strategies and that perspective just gives you a different lens on how to think about your budget. If you're focused only on your expenditures, but not really thinking about the ways you can generate more revenue and the kind of investments, not only internally that you can generate, but also from your strategic partners. You know, we've talked quite a bit about Imperial Valley and other conversations where they work with their K through 12 systems and created joint advising structures to support the kind of dual enrollment preliminary education plans that help to grow the dual enrollment students enrolling into Imperial Valley. That was a strategy that wasn't purely internal, but leverage investments from partners as well. And I mentioned the advanced model too. Thinking about being really nimble with your finances. So not only thinking your allocations are once and done when you go through the budget process, but really having the ability to understand where there's some flexibility should you need more resources as you learn more about what's required to be able to get those resources in ways that could lead to immediate change. Thinking also about what's driving your resource allocations. You know, historically, we sort of fit the priorities into the resources. We have X amount of money, this is what we can do, rather than this is what we want to do, and here are the resources we're going to allocate to get it done. But this notion of what's driving your decision making and clarifying when you're moving in a direction where you're giving up agency that's limited by constraints, you know, and figuring out how to pivot that so that your vision is driving the work rather than the other way around. That's very similar to this concept of limiting your future based on the limits of what you think is possible, rather than having your values drive and shape the ways that you think about the resources available to you, and allowing your imagination to reconsider ways that you can move and make your resources more malleable to achieve those goals. And then lastly, again, not limiting yourself to what's in front of you in terms of the institutional dollars, but thinking about where there might be strategic partnerships that can invest just the same in a vision that's big enough that they can see themselves in that vision and they would want to be a part of that effort as well. One great example of that we've seen is in New Jersey with the nursing program in particular. They've gotten so many hospitals in the community who need more nurses to invest pretty heavily in the programs there in order to support enrollment growth that would lead to more talent development to serve the gaps in their nursing communities. So next slide, which I believe is the opportunity for you to ask more questions. If anyone would like to share how the board is currently discussing budget resources and allocations through the lens of student success, and what might that look like to share with the group, or if there are any facilitators who would like to share more examples, it sounds like there's an appetite to hear more concretely about what's happening in the field. If anybody else would like to share any examples with the group.
I just want to make a comment. This is Cynthia Lynton-Gary from Houston City College. I'm listening and I wasn't privy to the first meeting, but I like what I'm hearing, and what I'm realizing is that we have been actually trying to move in this direction. And I'm really excited because I'm like, okay, we're not there, but at least we're making the right decisions to get there. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Your point is well taken. You know, in other parts of our lives, we would say we have to give ourselves some grace to get to where we're aiming for. But to your point, there's a degree of discipline it will take to stay, to hold the line and stay the course, because the reality is there's so many distractions, particularly in this moment, that could keep us from reaching the end goal. So your point is well taken. It's a journey, but it does take a commitment to stay on track in order to get to where you will be able to have the most impact. So thank you for sharing that. Any other comments or reflections? Belle Sanchez?
Yes, I'd like to add that while I see the big picture and I see where we are heading, as I sit with the rest of our board, I feel like we are heading in the right direction. And a lot of what the president and his staff that did this last year on building our budget is moving in this direction. Are we there yet? No. But we've been looking at the return on investments for our various programs. And we've been looking at transfers and all the House Bill 8 things that we have to look at. And so slowly we have made some changes. We need to make more. But I really would like to applaud our president and his team, because they are they're leading us in the right direction. We just need to get a little more involved in some of what we've discussed this morning. But I feel like we're doing well. Thank you.
Point well taken, Belle. I think I appreciate both of the comments, which really is elevating the reality that we are not starting at zero, that we actually have some momentum in this direction. And the time that we're going to spend together today is really to help accelerate some of this work and to ground it so that you can really be clear about what you're aiming for and to support that development. And so with that, I will turn it over to Leanne, who will guide us into our breakout groups. Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to talking with you shortly.
Thanks so much, Pascal. And Josh, if we can bump over to the next slide very briefly. We are going to make some slight adjustments to our breakout timing because I want everyone to have the full 45 minutes with your facilitator. So we are going to change the first workshop round from 12:15 to 1 o'clock. So the first round will go from 12:15 to 1, and then our second round will actually go from 1:05 to 150. So we're going to make those small adjustments. But the activity will not change, and facilitators have no fear. We will broadcast messages to your breakout rooms to let you know how many minutes you have left in your workshop time together. So in just a moment, we're going to zoom through time and space. Track A colleges will do an activity with your CEOs leading in which you review the results of your agenda ranking activity using the directions on pages 12 and 13 in your participant toolkit. My Track B colleges will go with your facilitators, so Maria, Brenda, and Mary, and complete the activity on aligning policies and budgets using the instructions on page 14 and 15 in your participant toolkit. And then if we advance to the next slide, we will do the second round from 105 to 150. And we will essentially flip. So Laredo, Wharton, Clarendon, you will be leading your teams in the agenda ranking activity, while the other colleges will be joined by their facilitator to have the policy and budgetary discussion. So thank you. We are going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms, and we will see you all back here to close out our session around 1:50.
Okay.
And you will see a invitation pop up in your screen to join your
Dr. Connor, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We unmute our.
Yes, I can hear
Can
you.
you hear us now, Hope?
Yes, I can hear
Okay.
you.
Hi,
Got it.
Hope. It's Jamel.
Hello, how are you all? And Dr. Connor, this is your session. I'm actually just in the backdrop, so I'll be listening and here if you all need me, but really you're running this one, so I'm here.
Yep, just want to let you know we're going to do a quick restroom break and then we'll get started. So we'll be right back.
Makes sense. Good to see some of you from before. Dr. Connor, can you unmute again?
There we go.
So with this, some of the work that I've been doing, I'd passed out the logic model for student success, which are three of our, just so that you, as we're talking, you kind of know what we have. This is a sheet by itself, and we emailed it out yesterday. But this is in looking at, for the institution right now, what are our three main success reforms that we have. One being our dual credit concentration, another the first year seminar, and then mandatory tutoring, and working through then with each of those, what will the students experience out of it, and then what's the result going to be, which is then our leading and lagging indicators. So there are three kind of focus areas. And then also, I think later on, we'll talk some about, I'd also written up something that I sent over to them about what's an emergency policy that we could be looking at that could be impacting some of our policy practices and budget. But real quick, before we get into this exercise, which is really about our board meetings, because I thought, in fact, I think this might be like my 1 year anniversary of being here at AC this week. So kind of as still, being the new president, seeing how our board meetings run, hearing from several of you as we look at how do we spend our time when we have our board meetings together? How do we want to be spending them? What do we want to be focused on? As it relates to having these student outcomes is really the sole focus of this work that we're doing. We have this session, and then there's one more session that's in a couple of months maybe that we'll get together with as well. One of the things, and they had mentioned it, they had pulled together some stats and demographics for Amarillo College. We actually have our own better stats because we have Colin, who doesn't look at the broader picture of the country, but really looks at Amarillo College and our region. And just wanted to point out a few takeaways from the numbers that he had pulled, and most likely these aren't going to be new news to you. Hispanics are our fastest growing demographic. So we need to really focus on solutions to increase their education attainment. We need to be developing strategies that support our part-time students to make sure that they're progressing and progressing, or at least moving to full-time status if they can. And then dual enrollment, which we know has a huge opportunity to change so many things with our new Badger Bound program. And I'm stealing a little bit of thunder for my president's report, which now will be this coming week. But our dual credit is up over 20%. So our region, those ISDs, the families, and the superintendents of the ISDs are really supportive. Overall poverty in our panhandle is at 16%, where overall Texas is 14%. Potter County's income is the lowest in our service area, even though that's just, one county of the many that are feeders for us. Only 36% of our population has an associate's or BA degree. 23% of Hispanics have an AA degree or more, and 1 in 4 never finish high school. 63% of our students are part-time. So that's where it gets to how do we find ways so that they're continuing to progress if they're working or need to. And then what we're seeing is our increase in dual credit right now, or before we started this Badger Bound program, about 17%. We're taking advantage of dual credit classes, and we're seeing a huge jump now, and we expect to see more in that work. And so wanted to just point out those. What we have, and I appreciate several of you were able to complete that really short survey, and this is this other sheet of paper, which we're going to kind of be looking at, where we just said, they had categories of kind of the main areas of how we spend our time as a board. And these are everyone that responded and said, as we were looking at what should be priorities, what are important, but not necessarily a priority, and then what isn't important. And we didn't have any that when we reported back came up as not important. The top 3 priorities are financial and budget reports, the president's report, and then our closed session when we have those. And then following behind are the regents and active committee reports, nominations and appointments, public comment, public hearing, our consent agenda, other types of reports, and then our students, our SGA that comes and gives reports. So thinking about how our board meetings currently run and how we want to be spending and investing our time and moving the institution forward during our meetings. And with what we've gotten, at least for initial feedback from all of you on what we see as important, I think this part of the workshop is just looking at, and I've got some questions for prompts to kind of help think about what do we want to be doing with our board meetings. And then the second part then is really getting to the nitty gritty to be able to talk about what do we want to keep that we really like in our board agenda? What are some things that we want to stop that maybe they're not, it's not valuable information, it's taking up time that we don't need to have, and what are new things that we wanted to start? So to kind of start off with these prompts that we have, when you look at the survey that results that we have, did anything surprise you about how we say that we spend our time as a board and what we consider important as far as what kind of came out of this versus what maybe you all are thinking or seeing? And Allie's going to be taking notes on all of this so that we can use all of this feedback as we're kind of reworking what our agenda, what we want it to look like.
I would say that our number 1 came out number 1 because of current events.
Yeah, we've been hobbled a little bit lately. That's
Not that that's unimportant.
that's expected.
Also, undue credit, I think the Badger Bound, to me, that would definitely put it up a way up because of the free college that some of those schools didn't have the opportunity to have. That's my assessment. I don't know what it really is, but maybe that would make a lot of difference.
What I don't like seeing is closed session being so high, and I really wish we didn't have to have so many all the time. And I think that's a goal that we have to try to start whittling away at that and not making that as, I mean, it's important, but it's almost like ballast that if we could get rid of, we can move faster and better. I want to echo what you said about Badger Bound. That may be one of these other bullet points you're going to ask about, but I think we need to have a Badger Bound report right away, right up front, maybe right after the Regents reports, or maybe assign committee to that or something. And I'm envisioning time limit. You know, we have to make a time limit, but have reports from every once in a while from the folks that it's impacting, the students and parents, the superintendents of a school district that really have come along with us and see the relevance and value of that. Sometimes see eventually maybe even another side of it, the employers, how have they, and that may be another conversation about the success of our students who finished here and going into the market. How do employers see us raising successful employees?
Okay.
That may be all I have today.
Okay.
Do you believe that?
Relates to public comment. You know, the student reports,
Mhm.
employers reports.
Yeah.
What I was saying is what you were addressing really also addresses the public hearings and comments from people's experiences with Amarillo College and how they're doing with the education that they've received. One other thing that I wanted to suggest, we do take quite a bit of time with the activities and the Regents reports on different committees. And I've been giving this a lot of thought actually since we were in Austin in October, September, October. September. Perhaps considering moving from committee meetings and committees to working sessions so that everybody's on the same page and there's not as many questions when we do have a board meeting. If we've had a working session, an open working session prior to that, then we would all have an idea of what was going on and there wouldn't be as many questions during our Regents meetings. And that way, decision-making doesn't have to go from a committee to the board. It could be done at the same time, and that would shorten the amount of time it takes to start taking action on some of these things as well.
The second one speaks to how do you want to be spending your time together as a board? When we have our meetings, what are the things that you feel are beneficial for your time and space here and what you're doing for our students of what do you want to have happening at the meeting, whether it's things that we do now that you like or different things that you'd like to have.
I really appreciate your president's reports.
Yeah.
They've been fantastic.
That's why I think that's so high, is because it's valuable. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and you know, I like seeing the data and then where we want to be. And I think we've gotten away from doing that, and because we've been sidetracked by some other things.
I don't even see that here.
But also the vision setting, I really like that we're trying to get back into this or into the vision setting, because I think as a board, we can dream pretty big. And I think that's our job for the community, for our students.
Yeah.
Like what you said about data and being data driven, and just the fact that we know that Hispanic students are our fastest growing demographics, and knowing that 23% of the Hispanics have an associate's degree. What does that look like as far as like a metric standpoint? And like, how are we going to challenge ourselves as an institution in raising that percentage? And what is that percentage going to be that we're going to try to aim?
But we also can't do it alone. Be a community-wide effort.
Yep.
Okay. Do you see anything that, or think of anything that's currently in our agenda, that maybe right now isn't legally required, or we could move to the consent agenda, in ways that free up time that we're taking during the meetings?
For me, that goes back to having a working session. Really, if we did that prior to our meetings, then a lot of that would be cut out, I think.
Understand that. What are you talking about for working sessions? When would we
Rather
have
than
those?
having committees on
So
different things,
The
having
whole board would come together.
Board get together to discuss.
That's another
ahead of
meeting,
time.
and it would be a long meeting. Right.
That would require an awful lot more time from board members that some might not have.
And some of the committee meetings aren't held here at this facility, they're held outside.
Like the tiers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What could we do them by Zooms? I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box.
Are there certain topics that you're thinking of that we would want to be having more working sessions or versus committee meetings?
What I heard in Austin was that they had done away with the committees and they were doing working sessions instead. And I thought that was a good idea, because then we all know what's going on and we don't have to worry about, because it takes time to have committee meetings too. And if you're on several different committees, then it takes a lot of extra time that could be cut short by having the committee meetings. Now for something like tiers, that's not a Regents committee.
Panhandle PBS, which you report on, so we would still have
Some reports.
reports. Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is that you don't feel all the board members have the information going into the board meeting, and still after the report maybe are still hazy on it. What we could do is find some vehicle after, let's say after finance and after exec, where we could communicate out to the rest of the board what was discussed in those meetings, perhaps?
That be,
I don't think, no, that would just be a one-way communication. I don't think it's illegal to.
If it comes from her, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
If she puts out the executive met and we discuss these points, we discuss Badger Bound, blah, 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 finance discussed this, then you would at least have more information. You could ask questions before the board meeting. Would that help?
Okay. Yeah, it would. Jamel, I had discussed it with you earlier, when we were at the meeting. Where are you at with that?
I think that if we have intentional working sessions on some bigger areas, that could be really beneficial. Kind of like we have once a year, we have the retreat and we kind of talk about budget, right? That maybe that's just not a once a year thing, that maybe for certain, whether it's certain strategic goals or just even working on our strategic goals, or specifically doing deep dives into some of the budget and finances, that maybe we have a few during the year that could be targeted a specific topic that really could give us the time to really speak into those. But then I think that something like maybe just communicating these committees that are meeting a little bit more ahead of time, again, so that if you all have questions, I've got time to get y'all answers before we're actually showing up at the board meeting, where then something might be moving forward. So that's something I could work on as well.
I think more information, however it comes, would be very important, because sometimes you get to a board meeting and it's a quick, we're voting, and maybe, you didn't have time to think about a question. I mean, I read through all the agenda and all of that, but it seems like there's more information that I need that I'm not receiving that would be very helpful. However you want to bring it to me, but I feel like I need more information.
And I understand that. I mean, because just me personally, just the other day, had not been for something I saw on social media, I recently learned about a committee that I never even knew existed.
Wow.
Meeting in
Yeah,
December
and
that I
it
didn't
was
even
going
know
on, and I was
about.
like, how did this person know about this that was going on? And it was like a live stream of the meeting. I was like, what?
It's on our, I think there's a report line for that committee that's on our board packet. There's just a line and they always say, no report.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that committee hadn't met for 3 years or something like that. Yes.
Like AFib?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
They hadn't, I don't think there had been a meeting since like 2022 or something like that.
So it wasn't new.
No.
Was it
Hadn't been
new?
on there because it hadn't met in a while.
It either. I mean, it's on the last agenda.
When you say in Austin, who's Austin?
Is that Cat? Are you talking about Cat? Cat meeting.
So
Cat
was
meeting
it CAT
presentation.
or a community colleges?
I think it was colleges that we're talking about.
There was a couple, 3 different ones that had said something about it.
I go back, and maybe you folks have been on here longer than me, because when I came on, we were doing the status report, status update, but I'm thinking we kind of went to that to kind of create a working, discussion around. We did that with Russell. We started. Now we've gotten out of that. So, yeah, I mean, we built it in. I think we changed it with Jamel. Yeah. Just because we did have sort of a more interactive, more informal way to talk about what's going on. And then some of those items wound up on the agenda to vote for. And I think Russell really made a concerted effort on big items to introduce it to us and vote at the next meeting so that we would have an opportunity for more information.
So kind of like what we did with Badger Bound, where it wasn't just we actually brought it to you several times as it was evolving to get feedback and all before it was finally, okay.
But there's no reason that policy couldn't come up with, here's what happened in policy. Now, if there's anything we're going to act on, you get that anyway. But, or legislative, these are the concerns going forward with legislative or whatever.
Could nominations and appointments, that's faculty things, I
don't even know what that is.
They came up with the list, but I'm thinking that might just be like, even with like the committee, how every year you guys.
that would be once a year.
So I think it got ranked as important, but I don't know that it takes a lot of time.
Done. And appointments, I thought were in the consent agenda.
To like teaching, professorships.
Leaving,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I'm kind of surprised about that because I don't know.
Yeah, if we have any questions about consent agenda or need any information, we can always request that it be removed, right? That item be removed.
Yes.
And discuss.
Yes. Discuss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Before voting.
And then because I'm watching the time too. So kind of we could go to the second part of it, which we're kind of starting to talk about. But when we think about our board meetings, what do we think about that we want to keep and and then stop and start. So it sounds like the president's report is valuable. Whatever we can put in the consent agenda as far as just operation things that you all need to approve, put that as much as possible there. And then obviously if there's more questions or we want to have more in-depth conversation, we can pull those out. The committee reports are still important to have in, but we want to work on trying to get feedback to you all on what's happening in those committees before, not just at the board meeting. So you have time to ask other questions. And then kind of and I'm envisioning, in addition to the monthly financial report, and I know we're working on our new strategic goals for the coming year, but as we set those, having some level of a dashboard where every month you're seeing what's our goal, where are we tracking to it, with possibly with a highlight presentation maybe every month that's maybe doing a deep dive on a certain area or something that we're learning about related to it. Because obviously I wasn't here back when Russell had those kind of topic specific. Is that?
I would like the dashboard. All of us could see it. I have a crazy idea, and since you're the only one on finance here, you get to say yes or no. But how could we have a co-presentation of financial report with the finance committee, the chairman of the finance committee, and Tiffany or whoever we appoint to present that out to the college that way? And the reason I'm saying that is because it is so important right now that we show that we're right on top of it, that's visible, that we know where our money is and where it's going. I mean, that's just an idea because I think that would help maybe.
Yeah, but I thought Jamel was in the reports in a way that they're going to be more informative and less conclusory about kind of a 35,000 foot view, and they're going to be more helpful is the way I understood it.
Correct. And I would see, I mean, Tiffany's doing them now. Obviously, I'll be posting and I'll be, to backfill the open role. But then too, with my background in it, I just don't know whether we need the chairman of the finance committee to be.
Are you reporting on it or is Tiffany?
Well, right now Tiffany is.
Coming up.
Well, Tiffany's going to do this month's.
But after we get running smoothly.
Then that would be the CFO. It'll be, to Michelle's point, it'll be a more in-depth report. Right now, it's looking at our variance, our full operating budget with our variance, our cash flows to historical, and we won't have it this month, but we'll start projecting. We anticipate our cash flows going. Those 4 key metrics that I talked about, tracking where they're at. And then we would be adding in as we're starting our new budget process for the 26-27 year. So even though right now we don't have the systems to build out tying every dollar right now to our strategic goals, but I'm looking at for next year, we would do a zero-based budgeting process that could do that. And at a high level though, this year, we should still, you're gonna be seeing more data on our budget, and not just, I shouldn't just say data, because more information, more about exactly what they were talking about, which is what historically I'm used to doing, which is, hey, this is where the budget's changing year over year. This is what we're allocating where, and that's going to help drive which strategic goals. And so that much more robust information than you get right now.
Could the CFO be guaranteed to be at the finance committee meeting, at least for part of it, so we can ask questions as needed?
They should be at every finance committee meeting, in my opinion.
And if we have, yes, but at the same time, when we're told, oh, we're working on it, or it's back at the office, we say, go get it. Go show us what, because these are questions that I think didn't get answered and we've got to have those answered.
Absolutely.
So that CFO is important
Mhm.
to get
Yes.
the right person.
Yes.
You know that.
And then too, I think the conversations that happen in finance committee as far as those questions are being answered, that's also, I mean, with what we're talking about, I could distribute that, but that could also trigger, hey, that's an area that maybe we want to learn more about as a board. So then we have a more in-depth presentation on it, because we can go deep dives into whichever levels once we get that person on board. Absolutely.
That 10 pages of numbers is pretty intimidating.
Did you read every one of them?
I know I'm there, but I'm like, okay, I'm trying to learn
Well,
something.
and the font is small and we never know what
Yeah.
page they're on because it's not at the same page that we're on. The page numbers aren't the same and to stretch the font, you don't get all the, the columns. Anyway, back to what's not on here is, like Annette mentioned, the data, and we used to have the data and as it tied to student success. And I felt like we really had a better idea of where we were with our students. Colin reported almost every month, and we haven't seen him in a year, it seems like. I mean, I've seen him around, but those reports, I really felt like, one, told us what we were doing well and what our weaknesses were on various data points. His reports were not very long. He would take a topic and just hit that topic and do it comprehensively. I mean, he didn't just try to open the world to us every month. It was a very specific topic as relates to first time in college, something. And
There's a lot to discuss. With
Yeah.
them, too.
But they gave us kind of a report card on where we are, and I miss those, and I don't know why those dropped off, but I thought those were really helpful, and I think I felt like for me, it made me connected more to the college. I felt more connected because I could see where the college was on various things.
Okay. And I think with those two, because I've heard a little bit about those, and I know when I think about my cabinet and the VPs, I want to make sure that they are empowered and own the students behind that data. And so I almost see like joint presentations where you have Colin talking about the data, but then that VP is talking about, well, what does this mean? What are we actually doing in driving that? So you have both together.
We used to get more reports from people like Edie Carter might come and talk about STEM something, or, I mean, we'd have really individualized reports from somebody about something that we really should know more about. And I mean, I know reports down here is second from the bottom, but I felt like those reports also let us know what's going on in the college. From the people who are directing it, yeah. And it gives them a chance to be face to face with the board in a way that they're not usually. And I think it's very helpful to build that collaboration.
Okay, absolutely. So
Totally agree. What about the Badger Bound? Where would that fit in here? Who would you say is the VP? Is that Frank at the top of that?
Yep.
To have a Badger Bound report in here? What do y'all think?
I agree.
Is it new
We need
to
one every time. We need a where we are this fall.
Could be.
Maybe vice versa or something.
I don't hear from constituents on hardly anything. And what I've heard the most about is Badger Bound. I've had so many questions about that. And honestly, I couldn't answer all of them. But we need to do better about informing the public. I mean, there's a lot of questions out there.
That was something I wanted to address, is the questions either from us or from a public comment. And Ally, I don't want to add anything to your plate, but if we had a record of the questions that were asked, and then kind of a follow-up of have they been answered? Either questions from the regents. I had asked about some data points, never got it back. Now I didn't follow up personally either. I said, we'll get that to you. And I left it at that. But I think if we had maybe a little more accountability for the questions that we do ask, like what you were talking about in finance and different things, if there was if it was logged, that the question had been asked, and then logged when there was follow-up on it and answers given. I think that would be very beneficial.
As long as it's not in the minutes, that public comments should not be in the minutes, ever. Just,
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
yeah, because there's not an action item. So, yeah, if you want questions followed,
And
yeah.
whether we've added it to an agenda as an agenda item later, because we've been told, well, I'll add that to agenda later, and then it doesn't ever get on there. And I think we need to be more accountable to each other and to our public. I mean, they're our boss.
So this airplane can only contain so much back in the baggage compartment. We haven't talked about stopping anything. Is there anything that we want to stop or need to stop doing?
Okay, let me just back up and say, we do a pretty good job on our board meetings. I mean, we don't
Right.
sit here for hours and hours listening to any stuff. So don't forget that, as we try to jettison things. So
But as we're trying to get better at what we do.
we can refine a lot of stuff.
Right. But we can't just keep adding things without switching some things around or dropping some things, as this says.
Yeah, but remember, we used to have that status update and then we got rid of that. The whole thing is gone and it's just in the meeting now. So I think we really have streamlined the meeting in some respects.
There may be nothing that we need to stop doing, but that's our.
Status report while we were eating, or did you?
I liked it fine, but I'm not saying we need to have it again. I mean, it was a way, I mean, I remember when Russell did it and it was a really way to be able to discuss. And, we did have questions the other day about the board doesn't discuss very much. And so it was a way for the board to discuss and kind of do things without taking votes because we weren't in the official meeting yet.
I kind of feel like whenever we go to like the satellite campuses that we get more information about what's going on there versus when we meet here. And it's kind of like going on here.
Yep. Point.
Did you like the status reports? Yeah.
Yeah, I would like that formality of doing it while we're having dinner. Yeah.
Well, we had dinner and then we had that.
We didn't.
Maybe it was like a board meeting, just kind of pre-board meeting, then we'd break to the restroom and then start the board meeting. And this is kind of just, to me, it's embedded, but I do feel what you're saying about it's not as informal as it was, perhaps. I don't know.
Maybe there's just some pieces that we could put on into the real meeting that we're leaving out from the status, not have the status, but just.
Sometimes we have reports.
Yeah.
We have reports in the status update that went on and on a long time.
But we could literally add an agenda item, which is our student success initiatives or student success reforms. And every month there would be at least one or two that we could focus on and have those in there.
I think it was Annette that had mentioned this a while back. Both of us served on the AISD board at separate times. And she said that whenever they were planning their agenda, that they planned each item on the school district agenda based upon what their goals and what their missions were.
Well, more.
And then you buy from the agenda on which category of the agenda, how that affected.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. Yep, that we could put especially once we have our new strategic priorities. But okay.
Always label them that way.
Yep.
According to priority.
Like it. Awesome. Okay. And I guess they'll let us know. They'll pull us out in a minute,
hope.
but
I'd like to emphasize
So,
things that Ellen said.
okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
David.
You okay?
Oh,
Well, your fingers may work, mine didn't.
There you go.
Not working.
Yeah, it's on. It was on. Maybe you can't see it. I could see the green.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I just like to emphasize two things that you mentioned, and that was the Collins data reports. I really miss having those. And reports from individual departments and so on, like you mentioned, Edie. But I thought those were very helpful for the board to really understand, see what's going on and a way to have information that we can discuss with the public.
Hope, were you getting ready to say something?
Yes, I think that, Jamil, you were asking, if they were gonna come on and say anything. You all were talking, so I didn't want to interfere. She just mentioned that from 1 to like 1:05, if you need to take a bathroom break and then come back in and start right where you are at 1:05, but it was text in there, so, I'm sure you guys might have missed it.
Thank you. Anything else before we just take a quick break and then we'll go into our second breakout session?
Good. You mentioned closed session. Is it important that we have to have that on the agenda every time?
I don't think you have to have it.
But we need to change the way we do it, I think. We need to finalize it. Person to Texas Code 5.1.770, or or whatever it is.
Well, we announced that.
Yeah, Mark usually will say which statute, yeah.
Say which.
Mhm, he
Yeah.
does.
Generally, it's to consult with the attorney.
But it will give a statute side. It will give which,
I don't even
which
remember. I
subsection.
remember reading that when I was.
It will
board
tell
member.
you
Yeah,
which
Yeah.
item we're discussing.
I usually read that too.
Yeah. You read that. I think before we go in, you read that, yeah.
He tells me to, so I do it.
Are you saying that we should have it on agenda already?
Would it be more to talk about specifically what we're going to discuss in there?
Well, yeah, under which
We're
code?
going to talk about property.
Yeah.
Under which exception,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which exception gives us permission to go into closed session to discuss? And we do announce that.
Okay.
Now, it might not be posted that way, but it might be. My understanding is, and I could be totally wrong, that we put closed session on there because at any time, if we start talking about something that we can go into closed session, we can do that.
And sometimes we don't need it, so we just say adjourn,
Yeah, sometimes it's planned, and sometimes if you start going down the trail, you might need that. And it's it's a way so that you can do that, the way I understood it.
My goal is that we don't need to have to go into closed session. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
If you're buying real estate.
I know.
Yeah, if you got a legal matter.
Legal matters,
I mean,
all of
there's
that stuff.
reasons that we have to do it. Ending litigation,
Something that was noted as not important.
No, that was just that if it had gotten scored low enough.
Yeah.
One could have fallen into that, but none of them did.
Are we on break?
Yes, thank you all.
This temperature going up. That controlled somewhere else.
It's too warm.
It should work. I mean, it's up to 74.5. That's good. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Feeling well, Jamel?
My house.
I was really sick last week. I didn't go to the doctor, so I don't know whether it's like flu or what. And then, so this winter storm kind of helped because I got to spend most of the weekend in bed. So now it's just the cough thing, but yeah, I was running a fever most of the week.
That's fast.
You don't have to worry about jet lag. Right. Just going south.
Our garage door is acting up, so you can't close it. So I had to go in, close it, and then bleed through the side of the garage door and thumb lock it. And Tyler said he couldn't do that.
Are you okay with that? I got hot. Are you hot?
See, why-
Okay.
Make it cooler in here. I looked at that.
It's 74.
And now it's 75. Like, I would take 70, you know.
We're calling.
Okay.
You tried to move it down, I guess it didn't work.
Oh, just realized it had gone up.
All right, is Hope ready?
Yes,
Right.
I am ready. Can you guys hear me fine?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, we are going to get started with what is considered to be the facilitator-led conversation. But I'm going to back up a little bit to just talk a bit with you about the session that you just had from an observer standpoint. Let me just say to you, and I'm not sure who said it, but someone at the end said, let me just say that we are a good board that's doing a lot of things right. And I want to make sure that you know that and you hear that. Because the thing is that when we go into this type of work with trying to be a good board member and a good president, then we're trying to get it all perfect. But we know that it's going to take steps as we move forward. There are some things that Jamel is mentioning that she's going to like to bring to the board that are so right there on point. There are some of the things that you all used to do, and massaging those things together is going to be absolutely perfect. Let me mention one part of the conversation. When we're talking about committee work, I would suggest it to you, and it sounds like it's already happening, that if the finance committee is meeting, then absolutely, of course, the CFO will be at that meeting, making sure that they are there and able to really guide that conversation, quite honestly, because they're kind of guiding the conversation based upon previous conversations that they've had with their president and perhaps even the auditor. It just depends on what that conversation needs to be about. There were other things that you all said that you were going to do, and I encourage you to do them, which is to have a report that comes out of those meetings. It doesn't have to be a lengthy report. Ours is really a paragraph or two. I actually challenge my team to make sure that the reports are not too long, because if they're too long, then it defeats the purpose, because people are like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to read like 10 pages. I don't want to know word for word what happened, but can we get to really kind of what happened? And so I feel like that is going to be quite instrumental for you all prior to going into your meeting, making sure that your committees meet, and then bringing forward in written format what the committees decided. So that's going to be really, really helpful. To jump into the session that we have now, it's really aligning policies and the budget to advance the student success initiatives. So when I was listening to the other session, Jamel talked about the how ultimately the agenda and your student success initiatives will marry. And that is the goal. So I don't know everyone that you were talking about, which is great because I'm not sure who a certain person is. But when you talk about bringing data to the meetings, I agree. Data is absolutely great to be in the meetings. I mean, excuse me, to be brought forward in the meetings. The thing is that data uncontextualized, or data that doesn't relate to your student success initiatives and all the things that you all had talked about, may be one of those things that, oh, I left the page, but it may be one of those things that you could cut out, stop doing. It's okay to have some nice to knows, but at the same time, you want to make sure that your data is really aligned with your student success initiatives. So before I go to the questions that were put before us today, I will say when we were in Dallas, I challenged those that were with us to say, you should know enough as a board member that if you're stopped, I love to tell my board this, if you're stopped at the grocery store, if you are at church, then you can give a thumbnail of what that initiative might be. You don't need to know the ins and outs of it because you pay someone to do that. Actually, someone. So you pay some VPs, some coordinators, some directors, you pay a president to know the ins and outs of it. But you need to know enough about it where you are never caught flat-footed. Where they're like, oh, I don't even know what you're talking about, you know. Now that might happen some, but because the initiative may not, you know, the person that you're talking to may have gotten it mixed up or twisted or that kind of thing. But when you really focus on the advancing the student success initiatives piece of the work that we're going to do today, it becomes pretty exciting. So that same person may not have to present for my college. Let me speak for us. That the vice president for student affairs and the vice president for academic affairs may not be on the agenda to present each time. What I try to remind my folks of is that the same way that we need to hear from our business area, which is going to present all the time, or our HR area on what they're doing to promote these things are just as important. So with that in mind, let's talk about, I have some prompts that I'm going to ask you, and you can kind of start up from here. But really the current state of things. What are our current policies that implement student outcomes, or well, I guess I should say, are current policies that implement student outcomes clearly responsive to and supportive of the college's priority reforms? Do you feel like and maybe Jamil, help me if you want to go to our emerging policy first, or if you want to, it's suggested that we go here, looking at the current policies that would impact kind of the college's priority reforms. And you mentioned some of them. I don't have the paper with me, but I know dual credit. You have your mandatory tutoring. There's a third one that is not, I read your stuff all the time.
Our first year.
Yeah, your first year seminar. You know, tell me about our current policies impacting those priority reforms. How supportive are they? How responsive are they to those reforms? Are we there yet? And sometimes the answer is no. We haven't looked at it in that manner.
I've got a question for you, Hope. When we last spoke about tutoring, you had suggested that we call it something else instead of tutoring.
Yeah, I don't have the paper with me that I mentioned, but I do think that sometimes when we talk about mandatory tutoring for our population of students, they don't necessarily supplemental instruction. Yeah, sometimes they don't want to hear that they're going to tutoring. There is absolutely nothing wrong with tutoring. You all that were there with me before know that I say the same thing, and I say it to my students. Tutoring is for smart people. If you make really good grades, you're not going to miss tutoring. But I understand that it can have a negative connotation as though you don't understand or though you didn't understand what happened in class. So you look at it as supplemental instruction.
I mean, I think on dual enrollment, I think our initiative with our Badger Bound program is a big one, like we talked about in the prior workshop. That was one where that came before the board several times before the board supported it moving forward. And it wasn't just we're going to offer dual credit classes, but it had a whole, where are the funding streams coming from? What can we offer and provide? How do we set this up so that we have new and different MOUs with our ISDs that get us into the elementary and middle schools, right? So it's, so I think that that's one of the bigger policies, I think, in the short time I've been here, that we've worked on. I know on the tutoring, some of the, what we've talked about internally and the exec committee talked about, we were there in Dallas, was with that, right? We say it's mandatory tutoring. What happens when they don't get it, right? So that's one to be talking about from a policy perspective. How hard do we want to hold our students' feet to the fire? We're not going to just tell them then they have to drop out of school. So then how do you do more of a carrot versus a stick? And so I've started with Faculty Senate, a conversation with them on, would faculty be open to extra credit for students if they go to tutoring this many times, and how would that work? And then talking with them, some courses make that easier than others based on how things are set up. But I think that's what you're talking about, is how do we take what are these reforms and apply policies of where we're staying and where the board's able to say, yeah, we're willing to stand firm to say we want real change in this.
Yeah.
And so this is what we want to focus on with it. Is that what you're thinking about?
That is, and I think it's making sure from a president's standpoint, Jamil, it's making sure that the board recognizes that with that mandatory tutoring, this is the part that we're working on now. Because with Badger Bound, it seems like you all walk that through perfectly, and that's how it's going to work. I mean, I do have a board member that says we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Well, sometimes you can, and sometimes you cannot. So you took that one through. So now it's time to keep that one going. So you'll continue to walk with that. But at the same time, now with the mandatory tutoring, what parts and pieces of this do you need to make sure become part of the conversation that you all are having in your board meetings? And why is this important? Make me understand as a board member, what difference does tutoring make? So what you will ultimately see, these are just examples, this is ultimate, we're just starting, is that you will see some data that says, here are the students' grades prior to going to mandatory tutoring. Then 1 year later, or maybe at the end of that semester, then you bring forward to them, because bringing it forward to them during the middle of the semester, that's wasted time. That's wasted time on the agenda because you don't know the difference quite yet. Bringing it to them after the students have completed that class and saying, okay, so in this particular class, X amount of these students were part of the mandatory tutoring. They did the mandatory tutoring, and look at how their grades increased. So this is how we know that tutoring works. Then you take that a year out and you say, okay, so now we've done this for a full year. And look at what we now see in terms of those students that receive mandatory tutoring. But now you have enough data to say, okay, now let's go back a couple of semesters so that we can see how this has improved. So those are oftentimes in Aspen, we call them policies. They could be a policy, but it really is a practice. It really is the thing that just becomes a part of the fabric of who we are. We're not just doing mandatory tutoring or required tutoring. We want to be able to teach and show and help you to understand why. Does that make sense for the board as well? So then your meetings become almost some of the topics on your agenda as a board, you almost don't even have to think about, because I'm going to get an update of some sort on. It's going to either be Badger Bound, but it might not be Badger Bound the whole thing. It may be, here's one portion. We spent this time at the middle school. We did, it may be something. And then you're also going to look and you're like, okay, so I know I'm going to hear something about the tutoring initiative that we have, the supplemental instruction pieces that we have. I also know that I'm going to hear something about the first year experience course or whatever. So those become almost like, I know I'm going to get an update on those things along with finance and buildings and all the other kinds of things. So that's what really Aspen is talking about with this. Because the question is, what are your current budgetary priorities? So I'll pose that to you all. Let's tell me, what do you think your current budgetary priorities are?
I'll answer, Annette here. I mean, meeting the needs of our students, number one. Number two is probably rebuilding some of our funds that aren't where they're supposed to be. And setting in place things that make sure they maintain the proper priorities and proper procedures for use of our finances. Yeah.
We've worked on the East Campus as far as additional programs for CTE type learning. The Career Tech group out there is doing a great job. Ernie Sheets and that crew. I hear good things about them all the time, about what they're doing.
And I think the budget prioritizes the student support services, not only our operating budget, but foundation funds, right? Grants, other funding sources to make sure those wraparound services are there for our students. Is another one. And then I can definitely see in the conversations with the budget, the care for our faculty and staff, our employees, that the board's always, within our budget, making sure that they have what they need too, because they're here serving our students every day.
So let's unpeel a little bit of that. When you say, you don't answer, Jamil. When it is said that we are making sure that the students have their wraparound services, what do we mean?
Well, that's talking a lot about our ARC Advocacy and Resource Center. The other day, the foundation presented over $200,000 check, $231,000 check to sustain what work they're doing. When I first got here in 2015, Russell gave me a tour, showed me the food pantry and clothing closet, and I was really unimpressed because it was over here somewhere and it was in one little closet area. And to what it's grown into today, I'm not sure we could do business as we do business without it, without Jordan Herrera and that group. It's a Dillard's-like experience when you go in there and shop for clothes, food's available, money for electricity and fixing your car, things like that. There are rules and regulations so that it's not just the system's not abused, but it really does show our community cares and that our college cares about our students.
So that is certainly, I would include that in our wraparound services. One of the things that I like to do, and remember, I don't know if everyone was on the line when I introduced myself as someone that has worked with boards for 20, 25 years for the South Carolina Technical College system. It's called the South Carolina Comprehensive Technical and Comprehensive Education Board. Well, one of the things that I wanted to always make sure of, and one of the things that I'll do in my short time with you all, is make sure that we talk in a language that you understand. So wraparound services means exactly what you said, but more. So when we're talking about wraparound services, she's talking about tutoring. She's talking about the advising that's going on in advisement centers. We're talking about all the student activities that happen to make sure that the student wants to be there. We're talking about mentoring. All of those things when you think about a wraparound service, you think about all of the student life that makes a student better and want to be on that campus. So when you come up with terms or say a term, or she says a term, or somebody, on her cabinet says a term that you don't necessarily completely understand, stop them and ask them, can you explain a little bit more of what that means? Because you're doing it. That's why when I was listening to you, I'm like, you're doing a lot of the stuff really, really well. I'm not sure that we're pausing enough to understand what that all encompasses. Are you following when I say that? Okay, I see a couple of head nods.
I do have a question for you, Ho, but when we're talking about budgetary priorities, to me, I'm thinking of more of like income that's coming in that helps us operate um, on a daily basis and what it is that we're doing to support those efforts. That way, so we can make some additional funds too.
Yeah, that certainly could be a priority. I think when Aspen is thinking about the priority, what they're asking us to remember is that the the reason that we exist, help make sure that we don't say, let me use Piedmont Technical College. The reason that we say that we exist is to graduate students. I want to make sure that students are graduated. I want to make sure that none of my students graduate into poverty. So
Right.
my budget needs to reflect that that is important to me. And I say to me, meaning to the college. So let's pretend we look at the budget, whatever's allocated from the state. It could be what we've even gone out and gotten in grants and that kind of thing. And when we look at the budget, we have placed all of that in, I don't know, let's just say we put it in landscaping. Okay, I'm trying to make it really easy so you get it. Landscaping is important. I believe in that because that is your front door to how students decide whether or not they want to come to be with you or not. So do not get me wrong, landscaping is really, really important. Facilities, all of those things are super important. But I think what Aspen is trying to teach us is that if you take all of that money and you just put it into landscaping, but then you said that your student success initiatives were important. You said that you spent a lot of time on wraparound services.
What you're doing is speaking so loudly, we can't hear what you're saying.
I
Basically.
mean, yeah, it's one of those things where it's a balancing act, and you're doing, and it seems like just from listening to the previous conversation, you're doing and have been doing prior to your new president a really good job with balancing that. Whether there's a little hiccup here or there, sometimes the hiccups happen when you have transitions. But I'm really super excited about listening to you talk about your success initiatives down the road and how you want your meetings to run. So let me ask you this question. How long do your board meetings usually last?
2.5 hours.
2 to 3.
Yeah.
If that.
Sometimes one.
2 hours plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that, are you happy with that? Would you like for it to be longer? Would you like for it to be shorter?
I think it's about right, personally.
Yeah.
So I asked that question because, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please.
That causes us to have a much longer board meeting, but that's pretty rare. And once in a while, they're pretty short when an ant swings the gavel. I think the length of our board meetings are just about right.
So, and that's a question that we say and we laugh about, but that is a question that is important. I had a board chair when I came in who was pretty clear to me that he wanted the meetings to last about an hour, no more than an hour 30. Now, that does not include our committee meetings. That does not include the dinner that we have, all of those things. But when we're getting into the meeting, the meat and potatoes of it, that was the challenge. Now, did we meet the challenge every time? No. But what did it say to me? It said to me, Hope, let's talk about what's important. So I think if you want to make sure that you're not there all night, that as you're building your agenda, you make sure that you are sharing and you are talking about what's important for the board to know, the bits and pieces that are important for the board members to know. let's go on, because I could ask the question is, are the student success initiatives embedded into your budget consideration? I think that those kind of things are they're going to happen, if I understood correctly in the previous meeting. The more you kind of do this work, the more those things, you'll start to see that. So I feel comfortable that those things will happen. Let's talk about the emerging policy. And Madam President, I'll ask you if you'll just kind of give a share, the emerging policy, or again, I think they throw around the word policy a lot in Aspen. It's really an emerging practice. It's a word, emerging way of business, or something we're going to focus on. But will you share kind of what you're thinking with this piece?
Sure. So they had asked me to look at, the prompt was what student success initiative or reform is likely to require modifications or updates to our current policies and budgets within the next couple of years. So I tried to think of work that we're starting that really could impact those two areas. And so I wanted to focus on our co-curricular pathways and partnerships, because I've gone and met with the president of Texas Tech, and we've been talking about the opportunity as we're working now to go backwards in the pathway for students of getting them, seeing themselves in school all along their K through 12. But then too, as they're getting ready to transfer, how do we increase those transfer rates and then the success rates of those transfers once they do so? And I think part of that can happen if students have the opportunity while they're still here at Amarillo College to go ahead and start taking a course or two with the university. With the Texas Tech president was definitely open to that. Takes faculty on both sides of the house being willing to get together, because they need to agree on what curriculum we're teaching and that they feel comfortable by the time we're ready to have a class here. So what does that look like? It's also actually them being willing to have one of our faculty members or their faculty member coming here, so our students don't have to go to Lubbock right away. They can actually, from a transportation perspective, come here. So what does that look like right now in HB8? I mean, we are rewarded for transfer, but this very intentional means of supporting our students through it. How do faculty get compensated to have this happen? What does our budget need to look like if we're going to start having classes that are happening on campus from another university? And so as we're actually getting ready to launch a pilot with one of the programs at Texas Tech. But that's kind of what I wrote up, because I thought, we've done a strong job aligning coursework with our partners, our university partners. But we know that student success requires going beyond those credits. And so building these partnerships with the universities is going to help our students connect earlier to advising, mentoring, give them research opportunities, which we're working on with the universities, leadership and career opportunities they'll need when they transfer. Help them see themselves as university bound, stay engaged, and persist through the transition. And then having some of this happen at our campus where transportation could be a barrier. And so right now, our current structures are largely built around instruction and enrollment, not shared programming or cross-institution coordination as strongly as it should be with our transfer partners. So to do this well, we may need to look at certain investments in coordinating these partnerships, sharing technology. How do we agree that we're sharing data, staff time, student supports, and who's going to give them? And then, so it's a shift from transfer as just a transaction to really a supported pathway for them. And so just saying that, with that, was what I came up with that I thought could really, there's going to be some meat and potatoes behind, from a policy perspective and a budget perspective, how do we have a whole strategy around moving this forward?
So I will tell you that I think it's a wonderful initiative for you to delve into. And I say you, meaning the college, to delve into. I highlighted moving from it being a transaction to transfer to more of a supported pathway to transfer. You talked earlier about there being, I wrote it down, 23% or so of your students are Hispanic. I didn't look at how many of your students are low income or first generation. This right here, if you all are to sink your teeth into this and really take this through step by step, this is transformational. So in the first session that you had, in the open session that we all had with the other colleges, someone asked the question of, can you give me a very good example of this work? And I didn't chime in, I was going to, but other people were talking. I will give you though, an amazing example of this work. I mean, I hate it because I wish it was us. We're doing okay, but we are not Tri-County Technical College and Clemson University. There is what they call Bridge to Clemson. I want you to put it in your minds because you can have the Bridge to Texas Tech. It is, just go look at the program. It is amazing. First of all, the faculty and staff met together to do all the things Jamil talked about right there, which is what courses do we need to, what we encourage the students to take if they want to be part of the bridge. Clemson University got very comfortable with it, particularly because their alumni, all of their kids could not get into Clemson straight out. So then, straight out of high school. So then they started to say, it's not that you have not been accepted. You are now part of the Bridge to Clemson. You want to talk about people posting it everywhere and jumping up and down like it's the best thing since sliced bread. My kid is Bridge to Clemson. They will have a year or two at Tri-County, but the goal is they'll be at Clemson. Now, let me tell you how they made it work. Those students have access to the library. They have access to sports events. They have access to cultural events. Now, as I'm laying this out for you, as you're thinking about your emerging thing, I haven't named anything yet that requires funds from you. Now, you might not say that out loud when you're in the meeting with Texas Tech because they might figure out, well, wait a minute, I got to give up some more tickets. But they want their football, stadium filled. They don't have a problem with folks going in and out of the library. They give the students an ID to do that, to go to, an event on campus where it may be, a band that the students like, and they're able to go to those events. Those things are great. The hard work is really happening behind the scenes with what, Jamil, you talked about it just a second ago, is with faculty coming together in one room, much like you're in now, and talking about, okay, well, what is this English course going to look like? What is this psychology course going to look like, and those students following that. And then they take the courses as outlined, and then they're able to bridge to Clemson as long as they have a certain GPA. Now, many of us in South Carolina, including myself, have similar programs, but I'm here to help you to make sure that I'm giving you the best example, and the best example really is the bridge to Clemson. I've never seen such excitement. So questions kind of on that in terms of the emerging opportunity that Madam President mentioned to us as something that you all could do.
Well, I love that idea. Transfer, we talked about it with Frank a little bit about having a transfer center, to help our students. I didn't realize our students had that just going to WT was an obstacle. And I am curious, Jamel, and it's not like I prefer one over the other, but why is it Texas Tech and not WT that we're talking about right now?
Well, I've talked with Dr. Wendler about it as well. Texas Tech they were ready. They had a program that they were just really to jump right in with us on. And so I would see that also expanding, that we would be doing a similar thing with WT as well. And it's very program specific, because I will say when I went and I met with another department at Texas Tech, and they just flat out said, when you talk about how important it is for faculty, they just pretty much said, we don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the time for my faculty to come sit with your faculty, and they're not ready. And so we're just happening right now, having the sweet spot. When I spoke with the president, his thing was all, because they want to get their transfer rates up. And he was very interested. He just said, I don't want one more group that's coming in and we're talking and we're not doing anything. So he said, I'll dedicate some of my folks if you're willing to dedicate the time to get it done. And then behind the scenes, we've had, Frank and his team with Texas Tech that were willing to sit down and get it together. But I'd see the same thing with WT. It's just didn't hit the ground as quickly as Texas Tech yet.
I mean, both schools would be, they're very well supported in Amarillo, lots of alum from both. And I went to Texas Tech, so of course I have a soft spot for that. But I love having this idea to help with transfers and to really give our students the chance to be able to get that 4-year degree and make it easier for them to achieve that. And that's a great idea.
I think WT is a lot closer to, and then I looked up that bridge to Clemson, and that Tri-Counties is 4 miles away, it says. And so access to the library is just right there, and so WT, we tried this, haven't we, where they got a WT ID and everything?
Did something, yeah.
Just haven't had any consistency in continuing this. And we've had these transfer agreements where we sign and have, hoopla and everything, but I'm never really sure where it goes after that.
I just figured the library was all remote. I mean, do people go to libraries?
Well, I think in terms of the library piece of it, I mentioned that because students do like to do their student group work. And then students that, like, if you're looking at Clemson, and then let's just look at Clemson, and then I'll talk about my situation, because my situation seems like it's very similar to you all, where we have signed every agreement, we've smiled, we've done it all. But I have a change, so I'm going to give you a little bit there. But with Clemson, because they are close, those students can go there and they may be studying for an exam, for an example. And the exam could be at Tri-County, a project or something they're doing at Tri-County, but they need to know that they had access to that same space. So they're not meeting at McDonald's, or they're not meeting wherever. They're meeting right there on Clemson's campus, and they're welcome because they look like every other student and you really can't tell the difference. So don't allow the library piece of it to get you as much as just the open access and the welcome into the campus. So there's one thing to, how did one of their staff members refer to it? They said it's one thing to be tolerated, and it's another thing to be invited. So I'll keep that in mind. Let me talk about me for just a second. One of the things that I've had to say to my vice president for academic affairs, because same thing, we have a college that is probably 5 minutes away. I don't know why in the world we can't figure out how, the university, Lander University, we can't figure out how to get that better. And we meet, we talk about it, we feel really good about it, and everybody's excited, and then we drop off somehow. And they will often say to me, well, I sent them an email and they didn't, respond. So here's the challenge that I'm going to give to you all. If it matters to us, sitting around this table, plus me, I'm now part of the group, if it matters to us that our students transfer and get that 4-year degree, then I would say, let the onus of responsibility be on us. Then I will keep bothering you. I'll keep talking to you. I will keep asking you if you want to go to coffee to make sure that we can talk about what we need to do next. Like, we can't afford to sit back and not be aggressive, because it's our students that we are trying to make sure get this opportunity. Now, it's all of our communities, but I want to make sure that I kind of said to my folks this past year, no, we're not going to sign and be in the newspaper and, be on social media. We really are going to get aggressive about what this looks like, because we want to impact the graduation rate of our students and so on and so forth. So I won't beat a dead horse, but I just want to say this is a great idea for whichever college you decide to. Doing both and is perfectly fine. You may find that you're able to get a little bit more leeway with one than the other. Sometimes the college with more funds can do a bit more. University of South Carolina is 1 hour away from where I am, and we get more traction with the University of South Carolina. Why? Because they have the funding. So they're happy to get the students. Here's another thing with the University of South Carolina, and I'm sure this is the same everywhere. Same for Clemson. When a student graduates from us, they are not part of their first-time, full-time cohort. So they're able to, that university is able to keep that number as high as they want to by whoever they accept outright. These are transfer students. Our transfer students do quite well, but Jamel knows what I'm talking about when I'm like, they don't have, it's not a risk on their first time, full-time cohort.
That's right.
So it's not like it's going to bring down their GPA or how much they say they take or what that SAT is, any of that. So we have the ball in our court some. I only have a couple minutes left. And I want to ask you if you have any questions for me. I would say, don't let this one drop. This could make a huge difference with your students and the student population that we serve. Questions for me on this or anything else?
I just have a comment, and I worked in a government program, Student Support Services, and one of the things that we did to increase transfer, that was part of the program, was that we actually took the students to the four-year university. We didn't just take them once, we took them for a transfer day, then we took them and we actually got them enrolled in the college before we dropped them.
That's a great idea.
And so I know that Amarillo College.
Bring them back.
That was Amarillo College, but it was Moore County campus. But Amarillo College used to, the main campus used to do some of this. I think maybe we could step it up and maybe make it more personal and more people that could do that. But that's an easy way.
I love it.
Get them transferred. So many are afraid to move from the 2-year to the 4-year, and they don't know how to get there. And it's so intimidating to see a big campus like Texas Tech. We actually took the students down there and did the campus tours and all of that so that they would feel comfortable there. So I think that's another thing.
We welcome you back. Hopefully your conversations were fruitful and productive. And if nothing else, you just enjoyed some time to be together in this very chilly week, in this very wild weather we are having. So welcome back, everyone. As you get situated and rejoined, we just want to do some very quick housekeeping, and then I will turn to Josh Weiner to formally close us out and to say our final thanks to all of you. So quickly, our next session together will be on April 23rd, exactly like we did today through Zoom from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central Time. And it will be our final session in which we bring sort of all the 4 parts of the framework together. We're very excited about this. CEOs and board chairs, please attend, and then please also invite additional trustees. For those of you that were on the call today, we welcome you to join, and if any of your colleagues weren't able to make it, it's not too late. We can still have them join for the final session. We'll do a debrief of this session, similar to what we did at the top of the hour together today. So we really want to invite as many trustees as are able to attend to join us. We will provide public notice, agendas to you as well, and do all of the things that we did this time to make it easy for you to join. We will give you a brief pre-reading assignment in mid-March. No formal pre-work will be required for the final session, so don't worry, you're not going to have to turn anything in, but we will give you some supplemental materials that you can read ahead of time, and we'll reach out to you about that in early to mid-March. Right now, I invite all of you to complete a very, very short 7-question survey that my colleague has posted the link to in the chat. So if you could please take a minute to complete this, we really appreciate your feedback. We do take it very seriously and we use it to make adjustments and to guide our thinking for future sessions. And so while you're taking a few minutes to do that, I'm going to turn over to Josh Weiner to send you out and to say thank you. Josh, over to you.
Thanks so much, Leanne, and thank you for the great questions during our plenary session when Pascal was sharing and I was sharing some of what we've seen in the field. It's always, I've mentioned this to you all before, but I've been coming to Texas for years, and it's my favorite place to come because of the engagement that we see by all of you in the work. You clearly care about students, you care about your community, and you're committed to the reforms that are needed to advance student outcomes, both during college and after college. As you move through the next few months, by the way, I also really appreciate that so many of you clearly, between December and now, and we have the holidays in between, we're doing the work. And so now you've got a period between now and April to do the work. And so I'd encourage you to continue to brainstorm what you want to do and to prioritize. What are the most important changes you can make as a board, working with the president, to create both the immediate advances in student success policies, budgets, metrics, and understanding at the board level, and to set the board up for the future? Think about those priorities, because I hear a lot of terrific ideas. And if you aim to do 30 or 40 things, you're less likely to land and sustain those things that need to be repeated over and over again and need to be built into part of the culture. So continue to brainstorm, continue to move the work forward, and think about your biggest priorities. Just keep asking that question. Where can we, as a board president team, make the biggest difference in our operations, which will in turn make the biggest difference in student success? So thanks very much for your participation. If you have questions, of course, please reach out to Leanne and to our team. We're happy to connect you with any of the exemplars that we've mentioned here. Happy to share additional information. Don't be shy about the questions you may ask. Also through Kim and the Student Success Center, we've got a great relationship with them, and they're aware of many of the great exemplars as well. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Leanne, and I think, is Kim here to lead us to the end?
Kim is here, and we have reserved a couple minutes for her to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Leanne. And thank you, Josh and Aspen team. Always a pleasure. I just want to echo those sentiments. I was able to jump into a couple of breakout rooms, hear the conversation, and continue to be blown away by you all's sense of urgency, but also level of curiosity, humility, and just unrestraint to really think boldly about your work as Board of Trustee members, but also that role with the CEO. So again, just kudos to you all for just showing up, engaging, being willing to grapple with these new definitions, these new ways of doing work, but again, all in the spirit of the outcome, creating a really unified opportunity to advance our student success agenda across the state. So as you've heard, more to come. We hope these conversations continue, and we'll continue to try to elevate ways to support you all as you continue this work ahead. So thank you. Leanne?
Thanks, Kim. Have a great day, everyone. You are free to go. Facilitators, if you have time to stay on for a debrief, please feel free, but we'll also reach out to you with some asynchronous options. And everyone else, enjoy your day.
Say aye. Any opposed? You have to stay by yourself. It's adjourned. Thank you all very much for